There are a lot of people, in fact, and I can't remember if this was you or not. Go ahead and raise your hand and be counted if it was. But there was a comment made on our show last week that Brock Purdy already is who he's going to be. Was that you?
I didn't say that. I
What
said
did you
he's
say?
closer to being the quarterback that he's going to be than Trey Lance is. In other words, Brock Purdy to me is closer to his ceiling than Trey Lance is to his ceiling. That's what I said. That's what I meant. And I'm happy to repeat it here on Willard and Dibs on June 12th.
I don't need you to repeat it. I'd love for you to explain it a little bit further.
And this is kind of the notion that you're talking about. People who don't think Brock Purdy can get that much better.
I'm fully understanding of the idea that from a skill set point, that, as we would call it, Trey Lance's ceiling is so much higher.
Yes.
You have someone who graded out as the number 3 overall pick in the draft. He can run. He's big. The arm is strong. All of the things, right? And then you have Purdy over here who graded out as barely being drafted at all, and he's small, and the arm is not as strong, and all of the things that we know about Brock Purdy. While I understand that, I guess what I'm trying to factor or figure out is 2 things. A, where do we plug in the part about how we're often wrong? So that's 1. And 2, Brock is even, and I don't even know this by age because I know that Trey didn't play as long, but Brock is younger in terms of how long he's been in the NFL. Brock was a rookie. How on earth, what rookie have you ever seen show up, and the second they showed up, you're like, that's the best version of them. That's the best, that's it. The best we ever saw of them was when they were a rookie. By definition to me, Brock Purdy should be a better player this year than he was last year.
Well, coming off of injury. So
fair. Okay.
I mean, that I don't know if you can just completely discount in terms of we don't know what the elbow reconstruction and the strength therein is going to be like. I know he'll be cleared to throw in mid-August, and he's got 2 or 3 weeks to ramp up and hopefully be ready for week 1. But we don't know what the long-term effect of that elbow injury will be. And I also look at his body of work at Iowa State, and I see a quarterback that at times was less accurate than he was his rookie year and more prone to mistakes than he was in his rookie year. And you look at last year, he got away with some throws. What quarterback doesn't? I'll give you that. But I look at Trey Lance, and if I was to look at this team and everyone was healthy, I would start Brock Purdy. So I don't want to make this a conversation about me thinking that Trey Lance should be the starter. But I look at what Trey Lance potentially could be with more experience, more times with the number ones and first-team reps and all the rest of it. I think Trey Lance has got more growth still to do than Brock Purdy does.
Okay, that's fair based on the fact that one played a whole lot of big-time college football and the other one didn't. But I also think sometimes, for instance, you bring up what he did at Iowa State, and we see this based on his numbers and what he did there. We have all kinds of examples of what someone was in college under a completely different system can be so different than who they are when they get into the pros.
True.
Brady couldn't even start at Michigan. Then he becomes the greatest of all time. Think of some basketball players. UCLA, when I covered that team down there under Ben Howland, was famous.
Oh, so boring.
It was so boring. It was wow, they got to 45 points tonight. That's amazing. Because he wanted defensive grinders, and he did not want anybody doing anything creative on offense. And so who came out of there? Players who you were they're talented, but I'm not sure. Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love. These are all people who were better pros than they were college players. So why can't Brock be that?
Oh, he can be.
Okay.
I think it's a bit of a stretch, though, to go from Westbrook and Kevin Love in basketball to Brock Purdy.
Well, just examples of players who were better as pros than they were in college.
And Brock Purdy is going to be better in the pros in large part because of what you said off the top, which is the Shanahan effect. Kyle Shanahan, his system, and not exposing Brock Purdy to too many things that he has to do on his own. And I'm sure at Iowa State, I didn't watch all of his game tape, but I would imagine that he was taking more risks under more duress, throwing the ball certainly more often than he does in San Francisco, and that absolutely would hurt his ability to win and have good numbers.
Let's go to James in Hayward on this, on Willard and Dibs. Hey, James, what are you doing?
Oh, hi. Well, battling through traffic like everyone else here.
Yep. Thanks for calling, man.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chime in on the conversation about Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. I wouldn't say I'm an expert observer of quarterbacks, but I really do think that Brock Purdy is very much better than Trey Lance. And I think we're talking about Trey Lance and giving him a lot of, say, hope because of the draft capital and the things that we surrendered for him. But then if he ends up being a backup, that's really what he is. I wasn't really impressed by the games that he played or what I saw. So that's just my opinion. I'm just really thinking that we're giving him a lot of leeway here because of he's a third pick of the draft. That's pretty much it.
Well, James, I got to say, and this is one thing that is hard for me to even formulate. I totally agree. And I can't stand that I agree. I don't see it. I want to see it. I want to look at Trey Lance and be impressed by something. And I don't see it. And I'm just like James. I'm not an expert. I'm not a quarterback expert. I watch a truckload of football. So we've all seen what great quarterbacks look like. But I have now watched Trey Lance in multiple practices. We've watched him in multiple games. I sat down on my couch and watched his entire pro day, and I loved that. But I admit that I was trying to convince myself of something because I think pro days are a complete waste of time.
Agreed.
I think teams go to pro days because they want to talk to the kid. They want to put the kid through an interview. The fact that a kid can hit somebody 25 yards down the field in stride while everybody's in shorts with no defense, my God, should be beyond a baseline. Do you know how many people in the world can do that? That does not make them NFL quarterbacks.
But what would Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have seen? And this is what I always fall back on because I'm with you, Mark, in many ways. I've seen his pro day. I've seen all the tape there is to see. I watch a bucket load or truckload, whatever you said.
Truckload.
Yeah. All that and more. I'm right with you in lockstep, and I've seen him at practice a bunch of times, and I'm with you. But I always stop myself and think then, what would Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have seen that would have moved them to trade up to the number 3 pick, knowing that Trevor Lawrence would not be there,
right,
and knowing with some certainty that Zach Wilson wouldn't be there. And you could have gotten McCorkle Jones, and everyone was saying, oh, the Niners want Mac Jones. And we did weeks here on 95.7 The Game, and I'm sure you did as well. We all covered the same story, which was they can't possibly be going for Mac Jones. And then when they traded up to 3, it's like they couldn't have done that for Mac Jones. Who then? If they went through all that to trade up and get Trey Lance, they had to see something that they liked.
Wow.
They had to see some level of potential that's got to still be in there.
I think he's a great dude, and I think he's incredibly smart. Think about if Kyle Shanahan has a weakness, it's what? It's that he at times seems robotic with his commitment to his, as you put it, laminated play sheet.
Gorgeous.
Okay? So if that's the case, and I sit down and you got a kid in front of you and you're like, man, 6'4", rocket arm, right?
224.
He can run, and he is whip smart. Like I'm putting stuff on the board in front of him that's complicated. That playbook is known to be complicated, and I'm putting it on the board, and he's nailing the test. He's absolutely nailing it. And then you go through whatever it is you see at pro days and other workouts, and you're like, yeah, right? It's there. The talent is all there. If it's a little bit raw in spots, you're sitting there thinking, we can coach that out of him.
I can fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
I can coach, like, yes, everybody, no one's going to be a perfect, completed piece sitting here at age 20. Essentially what he was when they were talking to him. He is actually, he's young. He is 5 months younger than Brock Purdy.
Exactly.
They are both 23 years old. But you're thinking, okay, right? No risk it, no biscuit. So let's give this a shot. And we think we can get him up to speed. Then the injuries mess it up. And then maybe you can't coach some of it out of him. Maybe. I don't know that yet. I'm not ending Trey Lance's career. Yeah. I do believe that the 49ers are frustrated with where it sits today. The same way I made that comment last August when Jimmy Garoppolo re-signed. I think
it's the same way that we couched it in terms of James Wiseman, where, yes, injuries cost him a critical year, and then you got to this year, which this would be the Trey Lance year, which is what Wiseman got. And James Wiseman got to start the first dozen or so games, and the team lost a lot of those games, not because of James Wiseman, but they didn't win in spite of James Wiseman. So you dug a hole. Wiseman became largely unplayable with these veterans, and then you felt like you got to a point where you had to move off him. And now here you sit with Trey Lance, and we mentioned this, you don't have the same luxury in the NFL to try something out, especially at the quarterback position, to see what you have. That's why I do think that these 3 preseason games for Trey Lance are going to be so important.
Yeah, they'll be big.
For him to be able to show them exactly where he is in his development.
This is a quick aside since you brought up James Wiseman. I was looking, just kind of scrolling around, looking at some old video, and there was a play. This was one of the first 10 games of the year last year when, thank you, James was still on the team. And I think it was the game in Orlando. I think that was one of the early games this year. Warriors lost, as we know.
Orlando gave them their best punch.
Yes, they did. Twice. But anyway, they go to Orlando, and there is a pick and roll situation with Steph Curry and James Wiseman. And Wiseman comes from the low block to meet Steph out by the top of the circle. And he throws out there the weakest, most half-hearted, absolutely nothing burger screen. Makes no contact with anyone whatsoever.
The whiff.
And then wheels to the hoop. The defenders simply switch. They are completely unbothered by this action, and Steph is sitting there flat-footed with the ball like, great, what the hell did that just do? So then Steph looks up, and James wheels to the hoop simply to post up the other player that's now on him and stands there with his arm up, not in great position. The defender is right on him. Steph opts not to throw the ball to James, and James does this whole pouty McPouty face with the shoulders drop and kind of whips the arms out like 2 pieces of spaghetti. Oh, supposed to give me the ball, chef. And it was one play. Maybe James was having a bad day. Maybe James only did that one time. I don't want to paint with a broad brush. But I keep going back to my original point. Every single time I see or hear this stuff, Draymond Green show and mouthpieces, walking off the court, whether it's punches, whether it's things like that, there's all these little things that to me build up to believe that young players in the Warriors system at the beginning of last year did not have the right attitude.
That was game 9, Mark, of 10. James Wiseman played the first 10 games, all off the bench. The Warriors went 3-7 in those games. That was the night they lost to Orlando 130-129. Wiseman played 9.5 minutes. They would end their road trip in New Orleans. Wiseman played 16.5 minutes, scored 5 points, and collected 6 rebounds in a game they lost to New Orleans by 9. They went 0-5 on the trip. Then Wiseman received 3 DNPs, played once, was inactive for about a month, played a stretch of about 7 games, and then after that, on to Detroit.
Traded to Detroit.
So that's, and
I'm just saying, again, it was one video.
No, but it's more than just one video because if you look at the start of that season, if Trey Lance comes out and had, if Brock Purdy's not ready, let's just say Brock, I need till week 3. Trey Lance comes out and plays like James Wiseman did at the start of his Warriors season, the Niners are 0-2. Trey Lance has thrown 5 picks and thrown 1 touchdown, and he's been taken out of at least one of those games for Sam Darnold.
The one thing I do know about Trey, though, and we're learning and we're putting pieces together with these Warriors youngsters.
Yeah.
Right? James Wiseman's now in Detroit. Kuminga's at the Chronicle. And Jordan Poole is over here, not letting Draymond talk to him on the bench. The one thing I'll say about Trey Lance, whenever we draw a line, is Trey will not do that. That I have the utmost confidence. Trey Lance will not pout. Trey Lance, that head is screwed on straight. I don't know if his footballs are straight. I know his head is.
Yeah.
That I know.
In
so that
football,
I give
you can't really do that in football.
It's
Especially,
true. You're right.
Especially as a 23-year-old quarterback. Gosh. You want to have your career end overnight.
Trent Williams would throw him into his locker.
Right. And then
absolutely.
I was thinking about Zach Littell as you were just laying that out. Because somebody shared that video on Twitter this morning. I saw it when your guy comes out to pull him and he slams the ball in his hand and Cap looks back at him like, mother, father, what?
We would like to talk to you.
In the tunnel.
Down in the tunnel.
Totally.
And we are sending you to Sacramento. Gone.
Yeah.
Next morning.
Yeah.
Gone. I love that the Giants were like, yeah, it had nothing to do with last night.
No, of course not.
No, he's never coming here ever again.
And
he's so stubborn.
If Trey Lance was to do something, if Trey Lance was to pout or do something of that ilk, John Lynch would probably act equally swiftly in terms of making a move.
Hey, Greg and San Mateo, you're on Willard and Dibs. What are you doing, Greg?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I was just thinking quarterback stories from the past, and I had an experience where I went to college at University of Alabama, Crimson Tide, back in the 70s.
Whoop.
And there was a guy named Stedman Shealy, and I remember they would have the Sunday morning interviews with Bear Bryant, the coach at the time, who was like a Nick Saban, 6 championships, et cetera.
And scene.
And he said,
oh, there you are.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. We lost you for a sec.
Bring it home.
Oh, got it now. There was an interview where he talked about a guy who was named Stedman Shealy, and he looked like Brock Purdy to me. When I saw Brock Purdy first make his introduction, I said, oh, wow, there was a guy at Alabama that reminds me of this guy, 28-game win streak from 76 to 79, back in the day when they played in the Wishbone. But I said, the one thing about Purdy that reminds me of Stedman Shealy is he doesn't do anything but win.
Well, and do remember that we used to say the same thing about Jimmy Garoppolo, and it was true. I just think, the argument, well, he's a concoction of Kyle's program. Well, he's in Kyle's program. So if he is, that's fine, because that has not been true with necessarily everyone.